A bathtub filled with warm water in a Parisian apartment. It is the morning of July 3rd, 1971. Summer light streams through the window, creating reflections on the water's surface. The body of a young man lies motionless, his face beautiful and serene as if he had simply fallen asleep. Jim Morrison, the thunderous voice of the Doors, is dead. He is exactly 27 years old. French police search the scene. There are no signs of violence, no visible drugs, just a young body in the water, and a hysterical girlfriend named Pamela Corson who can barely explain what happened. The doctor signs the death certificate, cardiac arrest. No one requests an autopsy. The coffin is sealed quickly, too quickly. The mystery begins here. But Jim Morrison isn't the first. Exactly 10 months earlier, on September 28, 1970, Jimi Hendrix was found dead in a London hotel. He had choked on his own vomit after overdosing on pills. 27 years old. Just 16 days later, on October 4th of that same year, Janis Joplin collapsed in a Los Angeles hotel. Pure heroin, too pure. Her body fell beside the bed, with $4.50 in her hand, the money she had just withdrawn to buy cigarettes. 27 years old. 3 rock giants. 3 deaths in less than a year. All exactly 27 years old. The press begins to whisper about a curse. But the story of this deadly pattern began much earlier, with a bluesman few remember today. The dusty Mississippi Highway in August of 1938. Robert Johnson, a blues guitarist with fingers that seemed possessed, plays in an underground club near Greenwood. His music is so revolutionary that legends say he sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads at midnight to play like that. But tonight, something goes wrong. He's been given poisoned whiskey, possibly by the jealous husband of a woman Johnson had been flirting with. For 3 days, the young musician suffers convulsions and excruciating pain. On August 16, 1938, Robert Johnson dies. He is 27 years old. For more than 3 decades, his death went largely unnoticed in an era when black musicians from the South were invisible to the mainstream culture. But his music survives in early recordings, and it would eventually influence every rock guitarist who came after: Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Jimi Hendrix. The pattern was established, but nobody knew it yet. The swimming pool of an English mansion called Cochford Farm. It is the night of July 3rd, 1969, exactly 2 years before Morrison's death. The water is illuminated by underwater lights that create dancing shadows on the stone walls. Brian Jones, the blonde founder of the Rolling Stones, floats face down. His girlfriend and a construction worker at the house pull him from the water and try to revive him. It's too late. The man who gave his name to the greatest rock and roll band, the multi-instrumentalist who played sitar, dulcimer, and marimba, the genius who had been kicked out of his own band just a month before, is dead. 27 years. The medical examiner found his liver severely damaged by alcohol and drugs in his system, but the circumstances remained murky. Was it an accident? Suicide? Decades later, witnesses came forward with murder stories, including a builder who confessed on his deathbed that he drowned Brian in a fit of rage. But in 1969, the world barely noticed the number. A musician dying at 27 was a tragedy, not a trend. Not yet. Then came 1970, the year that changed everything. September. Jimi Hendrix, the guitarist who redefined his instrument, who played with his teeth and made the strings weep and scream, who electrified Woodstock with a psychedelic version of the American national anthem, dies in London. He had called his girlfriend that morning, confused, saying he had taken some pills but couldn't remember how many. When she arrived, he was no longer breathing. October. Janis Joplin, the heart-wrenching voice of white blues, the woman who could make an audience of thousands weep with her raw and authentic pain, disappears from a recording session. Her producer searches for her at the Landmark Hotel. He finds her on the floor, cold, with fresh injection marks on her arm. She was recording what would be her last album, Pearl. One of the songs was titled Buried Alive in the Blues. The vocal track was left blank. She never recorded it. July 1971. Jim Morrison, the wild poet, the Lizard King, the man who transformed rock concerts into shamanic rituals of chaos and liberation, sealed in a coffin in Paris. The City of Lights becomes his tomb. 3 supernovas burning out in rapid succession. All 27. The music press finally connects the dots. The concept of the 27 Club is officially born. In recording studios from London to Los Angeles, young musicians are starting to do the math. Keith Richards of the Stones, who has survived countless overdoses, crosses the threshold of 27 with palpable relief. Pete Townsend of The Who, known for his self-destructive performances, quietly celebrates his 28th birthday. Eric Clapton, devastated by the death of Hendrix, his friend and rival, battles his own heroin addiction just as he approaches that fateful age. He survives, but the ghost haunts him. Is it just a statistical coincidence? Or is there something deeper, an existential poison in the formula of extreme fame plus youth plus success? The question hangs in the air like cigarette smoke in a dark club. Because after 1971, the club seems to close. Years pass. Decades. The patron disappears. Or at least that's what it seems. The 80s arrive with synthesizers and bright pop music. MTV transforms the industry. Hard rock gives way to new wave, punk, and glam metal. Musicians still die young. They always have, but not at 27. The 27 Club becomes an urban legend, a piece of rock music trivia, an anecdote DJs mention on late-night radio shows. Parents warn their aspiring rockers, don't become part of the 27 Club. But without new deaths to fuel the narrative, the fear fades. 1980 passes. 1990 passes. The curse seems to be broken. A red brick house in the Madrona neighborhood of Seattle. It is the morning of April 8, 1994. An electrician arrives to install a security system. He looks out a window into the garage above the main house. There is a body on the ground. Kurt Cobain, the man who accidentally became the voice of a generation, who hated fame as much as he craved it, who wrote perfect pop melodies shrouded in distortion and anguish, is dead. Shotgun. Self-inflicted. The coroner estimates he's been there for 3 days. He is 27 years old. The rock world is stunned. After 23 years of silence, the 27 Club has claimed another victim. And not just any victim. The defining face of 90s rock, the man whose album, Nevermind, dethroned Michael Jackson on the charts and redefined what alternative rock could be. At the scene, investigators find a note addressed to Bada, an imaginary childhood friend of Kurt's. The letter is long and rambling, quoting Neil Young. It's better to burn out than fade away. Kurt writes about losing his passion for music, about feeling guilty for enjoying Nirvana's success when so many of his talented friends remained in obscurity. I no longer have the passion, he wrote. So remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. His wife, Courtney Love, reads parts of the note aloud at a public memorial in Seattle, her voice breaking. Thousands of weeping fans gather. Some imitate Kurt's act in the following days. The tragedy is replicated. But what is revived with full force is the curse of 27. After Cobain's death, academics and music journalists began to investigate seriously. Is the 27 Club real or an illusion? A study by Queen Mary University of London will eventually analyze the deaths of famous musicians. Its findings are disturbing. Musicians are 2 to 3 times more likely to die young than the general population. The risk is especially high between the ages of 22 and 25 during the initial rise to fame. But 27 specifically doesn't show a statistically significant peak. That is, more musicians die at 25 or 23 than at 27. The club is partly a media construct, a pattern our brains seek out and find amidst the noise of chaos. However, the list of names at that specific age is undeniable. And after Cobain, the concept solidified in the cultural consciousness. Every musician approaching 27 after 1994 lives under that shadow. Kurt's death changes something fundamental. The 27 Club is no longer just retro trivia about rockers from the 60s and 70s. It's contemporary. It's relevant. It's terrifying. Musicians of the 90s and 2000 are beginning to speak openly about fear. Some mention it in interviews as they approach that age. Others superstitiously avoid it, as if naming it might summon it. Fans change too. When a beloved artist turns 27, social media, when it eventually exists, is flooded with messages of relief when they turn 28. It's as if the entire pop culture holds its breath every time an extraordinary talent enters that cursed year. London, July 2005. Amy Winehouse has just turned 22. Her debut album, Frank, was a modest success, but she's working on something bigger, more personal, more raw. She'll call it Back to Black. Amy has a voice that sounds like she's lived 5 lives, with the soul of Billie Holiday filtered through North London. But she also has demons, addiction to alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships, bulimia, depression. In 5 years, he will be 27. The clock has started ticking again, but no one knows it yet. Amy is in a studio, smoking, drinking wine, writing songs about her broken heart. Songs that will make her world famous. Songs that will document her downfall. The pattern is set to repeat itself once again. A black and white music video. Amy Winehouse, with her impossibly high beehive hairdo and thick Cleopatra-like eyeliner, sings, "They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no." It's 2006. Back to Black has just been released and becomes a global phenomenon. Amy wins 5 Grammy Awards in 2008, tying the record for a female artist in a single night. She's 24 years old and the biggest thing in music. But the song that made her famous is literal. Her family really did try to send her to rehab. She really refused to go, and the world is watching her self-destruct in real time. The paparazzi hound Amy relentlessly. Photographs of her staggering drunk through the streets of Camden, covered in scratches and bruises, grace the front pages of tabloids weekly. A video of her smoking crack is leaked online. The public feeds on her suffering for entertainment. Her father, Mitch Winehouse, struggles to intervene but will later admit that he, too, enjoyed the attention. Her husband, Blake Fielder Civil, is in and out of prison for drug-related offenses. When Blake is out, Amy uses more. When he's in, she visits him and uses more. It's a vicious cycle documented by 1,000 camera lenses. In interviews during 2010, when Amy was 26, journalists began mentioning the 27 Club. Some did so subtly, asking her about the legacy of Janis Joplin or Jim Morrison. Others were direct. "Are you worried about turning 27? Amy usually deflected questions with humor, but close friends would later report that she was obsessed with it. She frequently mentioned Kurt Cobain. She spoke of Janis Joplin as a spiritual sister. Her father Mitch would later say, "She knew about the 27 Club. We all knew. She was like a shadow in the room." Can a curse become real simply because people believe in it? Amy turns 27 on September 14, 2010. She has spent years in and out of rehab. She has achieved periods of sobriety, only to relapse. Her last album was 4 years ago. Record companies are pushing for new music, but Amy can barely function. In June 2011, she attempted a European tour. The opening concert in Belgrade was a disaster. Amy was clearly intoxicated, forgetting lyrics and staggering on stage. Videos of the debacle went viral. The tour was canceled. Amy returned home to Camden, London. Julio arrives. It's hot. Amy is alone except for her bodyguard, who checks on her periodically. The afternoon of July 23, 2011. Amy's house in Camden Square is quiet. She has been drinking again after weeks of sobriety. Her body, weakened by years of abuse, cannot handle it. Her bodyguard comes upstairs around 3 in the afternoon. Amy is in her bed, lying on her side, as if asleep. But she isn't asleep. She's dead. Empty vodka bottles are in the room. The coroner will determine that the cause was alcohol poisoning. His blood alcohol level was 419 milligrams per 100 milliliters, more than 5 times the legal limit for driving. Enough to kill. Amy Winehouse is 27 years old. The news explodes globally, not as a surprise, but as confirmation of something everyone had been expecting but hoped would never happen. The 27 Club has claimed another member. Tributes fill the streets of Camden. Fans pile up flowers, candles, bottles of wine, handwritten notes. Her father, Mitch, walks through the crowd, weeping openly. He says, "This isn't a club. It's a curse we need to break." Contemporary musicians are tweeting their shock and grief, but also their fear. Because if it happened to Amy, who had so many attempts at intervention, so much help available, so much love surrounding her, could it happen to anyone? The pattern now seems undeniable. Robert Johnson, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse. 7 iconic names. 7 deaths at 27. Separated by decades. but connected by age and the self-destructive nature of their genius. But there are more names. Lesser-known names that also belong to the club. Alan Blind Owl Wilson of Canned Heat, found dead from barbiturates in 1970. 27 years old. Pete Ham of Badfinger, who hanged himself in 1975 after his manager stole his royalties. 27 years old. Years later came Richie Edwards of Manic Street Preachers, who disappeared in 1995, presumably by suicide. 27 years old. Freaky Ta of Lost Boys, shot in 1999. 27. The list is longer than popular culture remembers. Each name represents a talent cut short, a life ended just as it should have been reaching its full potential. What do they all have in common besides age? A neuroscience lab at Harvard University. Scientists observe brain scans of people of different ages. The brains of 27-year-olds show something fascinating. They are almost fully developed, but not quite. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control, long-term planning, and risk assessment, doesn't fully mature until around age 25 to 30. 27 is right at that critical threshold. Combined with years of substance abuse, emotional trauma, and extreme stress, a brain at this stage is particularly vulnerable. It's not magic. It's biology. Researchers identify factors that accumulate in successful artists during their 20s. Sudden fame. Most members of the 27 Club achieved massive fame in their early 20s. The human brain is not equipped to handle that level of attention, scrutiny, and adulation. It is evolutionarily abnormal. Unlimited access. Sudden wealth plus a culture of excess means unrestricted access to drugs, alcohol, and dangerous situations. Without the maturity to set boundaries, the outcome is predictable. Isolation, extreme fame creates a bubble. True friends are replaced by flatterers. Family is sidelined by managers and assistants. Loneliness in the midst of crowds. Production pressure. Record companies demand constant albums. Exhausting tours. Endless interviews. Body and mind are worn out. But there's something more. Something that purely scientific studies don't fully capture. Artists who reach that level of creative genius often share one trait: extreme sensitivity. An emotional openness that allows them to create profoundly moving art, but also makes them vulnerable to the pain of the world. Jim Morrison wrote poetry about the end of love, the death of God, the horrors of the Vietnam War. He couldn't filter suffering like other people. He absorbed it. Janis Joplin sang the blues with such authenticity because she truly felt that pain. Her heart was perpetually broken, not only from failed romances, but from existing in a world that seemed too cruel. Kurt Cobain was hypersensitive from childhood. His parents' divorce devastated him. The chronic stomach pain he suffered for years tormented him. Fame overwhelmed him to the point of collapse. Amy Winehouse wrote about her heart as if it were an external organ, throbbing and exposed. Every betrayal, every rejection, every moment of shame became a song. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is the price of transcendent art. But it is also a deadly vulnerability. Posthumous interviews with friends and family reveal a consistent pattern. Many of these artists began using substances as a way to cope with anxiety, depression, or physical pain. Jimi Hendrix suffered from debilitating anxiety before performances. Drugs calmed him down. Janis Joplin drank to cope with her insecurity about her appearance, her voice, her worth as a woman in a male-dominated industry. Kurt Cobain used heroin to numb the chronic stomach pain that doctors could not diagnose or effectively treat. Amy Winehouse drank to silence the voices of self-criticism, to escape the pressure of impossible expectations. Addiction wasn't just hedonistic self-destruction. It was failed survival. It was trying to keep functioning when your psyche is disintegrating. But some crossed the threshold. Pete Townsend of The Who speaks openly about his terror of turning 27 after the deaths of Jimmy, Janis, and Jim. He survived because, he says, he entered therapy just in time. Eric Clapton, devastated by Hendrix's death, eventually achieved rehabilitation after years of catastrophic addiction. But he lost his young son in an accident years later, a different but equally destructive grief. Courtney Love, who turned 27 while Kurt was alive, survived, but has spoken about feeling guilty, as if it should have been her instead of him. Keith Richards is still alive at 81 in 2025, after having tried virtually every drug known to human. His survival is as mysterious as the deaths at the club. Genetics, he says with dark humor and sheer stubbornness. But the 27 Club didn't stop with Amy Winehouse. 2012. Anton Yelchin, the actor known for Star Trek, dies in a bizarre accident when his car crushes him in his own driveway. 27 years old. He's not a musician, but age is a factor. 2017. Lil Peep, pioneer of emo rap, dies of an accidental overdose on his tour bus. Fentanyl and Xanax. Not 27 years old. He was 21, but his death reflects the pattern. Young, talented, self-destructive. The reality is that musicians are still dying young. The industry hasn't changed as much as we think. Access to drugs is easier. Social media pressures add new layers of scrutiny. Mental health remains stigmatized. Will the pattern repeat itself? Is there another name waiting to join the club? We return to Mississippi. The story everyone knows. Robert Johnson met the devil at a crossroads at midnight. The devil tuned his guitar. In return, Johnson sold his soul. That explains his supernatural talent. It's a beautiful story. It's also probably false. Robert Johnson was a dedicated musician who practiced obsessively for years, studying with blues masters like Son House. His technique wasn't a gift from the devil, but the result of thousands of hours of grueling practice. But the legend persists because we want to believe that genius has a mystical origin, especially when it ends in tragedy. The truth, that Johnson was poisoned by a jealous husband in a mundane argument, is far too banal. Myth is more satisfying than reality. The internet is full of theories about the 27 Club. The Illuminati. A popular theory claims that these artists were sacrifices to a secret society. Their deaths at age 27 were supposedly ritualistic. The evidence? None. The appeal? It allows chaos to have order, tragedies to have purpose. Covert murders, particularly surrounding Kurt Cobain and Brian Jones. Theories insist they were murdered and the scene staged to look like suicide or accident. There are inconsistencies in investigations, it's true. But inconsistencies don't prove conspiracy. Generational curses. Some believe that a literal curse haunts certain artists, passed down since Robert Johnson. It's folklore disguised as analysis. Why do people create these theories? A psychologist explains, humans are pattern-making machines. We see faces in clouds. We find shapes in random constellations of stars. When tragedies strike people we love, especially artists whose art has saved us, we need it to mean more than just chaos. The 27 Club gives structure to chaos. It turns random deaths into a pattern. And a pattern implies that it could have been prevented, that it could be avoided in the future. But what if there's no real pattern? What if 27 isn't magic, but simply a time when many artists have had enough time to become famous and self-destructive, but not enough time to develop survival mechanisms? Here's the real problem. Once the 27 Club enters the cultural consciousness, it becomes part of the environment in which young artists operate. When Amy Winehouse knew about the club, when journalists asked her about it, when fans speculated, did it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? If you believe you're destined to die at 27, do you stop fighting so hard to survive? Is there a part of you that accepts fate? The danger of myth is that it can create the reality it describes. A 2011 study from Queen Mary University of London analyzed over 1,000 famous musicians. Its findings: musicians are 2 to 3 times more likely to die prematurely than the general population. The risk is highest between 25 and 30 years of age. But there is no specific statistical peak at 27. More famous musicians have died at 25, 28, or 30 than at 27. Another study examined whether the 27 Club is statistically real. Conclusion: no. It's confirmation bias. We remember deaths at age 27 because they fit the narrative, and we ignore deaths at other ages because they don't. But then, why does it feel so real? Scene 6. The complex response. The truth is multifaceted and paradoxical. There is no literal curse. 27 is not a magical age of death. But there are real factors that make the late 20s dangerous for artists. Still developing brains, years of cumulative abuse, the pressures of fame, access to substances. The myth has real power. Once established, it affects behavior. Artists who know the club face additional pressure, additional fear, or fatalistic resignation. We remember selectively. The greatest names who died at 27 become legends. Those who died at 25 or 29 are forgotten. Pain is universal. It doesn't matter if it's statistically significant. Each of these deaths is a genuine tragedy, wasted talent, unrealized potential. The 27 Club is both real and unreal simultaneously. It's a cultural construct based on genuine tragedies, amplified by the human need for role models, and perpetuated by media that find the narrative irresistible. But for those who die, for their families, for their fans, the distinction doesn't matter. The loss is absolute. A studio in Los Angeles, October 1970. Janis Joplin is in front of the microphone, headphones on, recording Mercedes-Benz. It's an acoustic take, just her voice, no band. She sings about materialism, about wanting things, about the loneliness of having everything except what you really need. She finishes the take, laughs, and says, "That's it." She doesn't know it, but it's the last complete song she'll ever record. Days later, she'll be dead. Her voice on that recording sounds tired, ironic, somehow aware that time is running out. The latest works of club members frequently contain disturbing prophecies. Jim Morrison's last album with The Doors is titled L.A. Woman. One of the songs is Riders on the Storm, about killers on the highway, about the end of the journey. The lyrics are dark, fatalistic. Morrison records it in a deep, almost whispering voice. He sounds like a man saying goodbye. Kurt Cobain wrote in his final suicide note, "It's better to burn out than fade away," quoting Neil Young. But years earlier, in songs like Come As You Are and All Apologies, he had already been writing elegies for himself. Amy Winehouse titled her masterpiece, Back to Black, A Return to Darkness. The song, Rehab, documents her rejection of help. Love is a losing game, sounds like surrender. Her voice carries the weight of knowing she's losing the battle. Is it hindsight bias, seeing omens just because we know the ending? Or did these artists actually know, on some level, that they were living through the final chapters? Jim Morrison said to Pamela Corson the night before he died, "You're going to leave me, aren't you?" Sensing abandonment, or recognizing that he was about to depart. Jimi Hendrix left a poem in the apartment where he died, written days before. The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye / the story of love is hello and goodbye / until we meet again. Kurt Cobain called suicide prevention days before his death. He hung up without speaking. Amy Winehouse called her doctor the night she died, but he didn't answer. What would he have said? They are fragments, small moments that in retrospect seem like cries for help. But in real time, how many were heard? Johnny Cash survived his self-destructive period in the 60s, but came very close. Amphetamine addiction, erratic behavior. His wife, June Carter, literally saved him. Ozzy Osbourne should have died 1,000 times over. Overdoses, accidents, decades of extreme abuse. He's 76 in 2025. Elton John, in rehab in 1990, admitted he was days away from death. Cocaine, alcohol, bulimia. The human body has its limits. What did these survivors have that the dead didn't? Luck? Better support networks? Genetics? Or simply timing? Intervening at the exact right moment? There's a controversial theory in psychology that extreme creativity and mental illness are correlated. Not direct causality, but a statistical association. Studies show that visual artists, writers, and musicians have higher rates of mood disorders, particularly depression and bipolar disorder. The emotional openness that allows for the creation of profound art can also make life unbearably painful. Vincent van Gogh cut off his own ear. Virginia Woolf filled her pockets with stones and drowned herself. Sylvia Plath put her head in the oven. Hemingway, a shotgun. Artists process emotion differently. What for others is fleeting sadness, for them is an abyss. What for others is momentary joy, for them is transformative ecstasy. Living at the extremes produces extraordinary art. It also produces extraordinary suffering. But there is another cost that is rarely discussed: the trauma of being turned into a commodity. Janis Joplin was marketed as the queen of rock, the wild woman, the hard drinker. Record companies promoted that image because it sold records. But behind the image was an insecure woman who longed to be loved. Jim Morrison was packaged as the Lizard King, the sexy shaman of rock. The expectations of constantly being transgressive and dangerous exhausted him. He wanted to be taken seriously as a poet, not idolized as a sex symbol. Kurt Cobain hated being the spokesperson for a generation. He didn't ask for that role. The burden of representing the teenage discontent of millions was unbearable. Amy Winehouse became a media circus, her addiction exploited by tabloids that made millions off her suffering. When you're a human being turned into a product, how do you maintain a sense of self? How do you ask for help when your pain is public entertainment? If you could talk to them the day before they died, what would you say? Could you convince Jim not to take that bath? Kurt to call someone? Amy to seek help one more time? Or was the path already set by years of decisions, cumulative traumas, altered brain chemistry, and missed opportunities? Survivors say that help only works when the person is ready. You can force rehabilitation, but you can't force the will to heal. Perhaps the real question is not why they died at 27, but why some managed to survive when the odds are so terrible. After Amy Winehouse's death in 2011, something changed in the music industry. Not dramatically, not immediately, but slowly. Record label executives are beginning to include wellness clauses in contracts. Some young artists are receiving mandatory access to therapists and counselors. Tours are including mental health professionals. Is it genuine altruism or legal protection? Probably both. Lawsuits from the families of deceased artists have cost millions. But also, some in the industry genuinely don't want any more deaths on their conscience. Contemporary artists are speaking more openly about mental health than ever before. Billie Eilish, who rose to massive fame as a teenager, talks in interviews about therapy, setting boundaries, and saying no. As she approaches her 27th birthday in 2028, fans are already expressing concern. But she seems more aware, more protected than previous generations. Machine Gun Kelly makes direct reference to the 27 Club in his music, acknowledging the pattern, consciously challenging it. Demi Lovato survived a near-fatal overdose at age 25 in 2018. She documented her recovery publicly, without shame. Transparency is armor against the stigma that killed previous generations. Some things have improved. Access to treatment. Luxury rehabilitation clinics offer discretion and quality care. Successful artists have resources that previous generations did not. Trauma awareness. We now understand that addiction is frequently a symptom of untreated trauma. Modern therapeutic approaches address root causes, not just symptoms. Destigmatization. Talking about mental health is no longer an absolute taboo. Seeking help is seen as a strength, not a weakness. But there are also new pressures. Social media, 24/7 scrutiny, instant cruel comments, constant comparison. The pressure that destroyed Amy is multiplied exponentially. Cancel culture. One mistake can end careers. The fear of being canceled creates paralyzing anxiety. Streaming economics. Artists need to constantly produce content to stay relevant. Burnout is endemic. Some artists reject the system completely. Sia hides her face. She refuses to be a celebrity. Her music is successful, but she remains private. Lauryn Hill disappeared at the height of her fame, turning down tours and interviews. Many judged her, but perhaps it was an act of self-preservation. Dave Chappelle walked away from $50 million in 2005 because fame was destroying him mentally. Years later, he explained, "The speed of fame is not healthy." How many artists from the 27 Club would have survived if they had simply said no, rejected fame, walked away? Mitch Winehouse established the Amy Winehouse Foundation after his daughter's death, focusing on addiction prevention among young people. He says in interviews, Amy didn't want to die. She wanted to stop suffering. Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain's widow, has been controversial but consistently vocal about mental health and addiction. Her daughter, Frances Bean, who was only 20 months old when Kurt died, now speaks publicly about breaking intergenerational cycles of trauma. Brian Jones' parents eventually admitted that they didn't understand the depth of his suffering when he was alive. Their regret is palpable. Families carry a burden of guilt they don't deserve, but their activism could potentially save future lives. Here's what nobody wants to ask. Does the music industry fundamentally need self-destructive artists? Art born from pain sells. The narrative of the tortured genius is romantic. Albums like Amy's Back to Black are so powerful precisely because they distill real suffering into melody. If Amy had been healthy and sober, would she have made that album? If Kurt had been happy, would Nirvana have captured the angst of a generation? It's a terrible ethical question, because the answer could be yes, And that would mean that we somehow value art more than the lives that create it. Fans say they would have preferred Amy to live even if she never made another album. But is that true? Or do we love these artists precisely because they burned out brightly and quickly? Is the 27 Club over? Statistically, probably not. Talented young people will continue to face temptations, pressures, vulnerable brain chemistry, and access to lethal substances. Some will die at 27, some at 25, some at 30. But perhaps we can change the odds. Better support systems, less stigma, more early interventions, an industry that values longevity over short-term exploitation. Or perhaps the club is inevitable, a manifestation of a darker truth, that some humans are simply not built for the intensity of existence that extreme fame requires, and that our appetite for their gifts guarantees their destruction. It's a thought no one wants to confront. But as long as we continue to consume the art of self-destructive geniuses, as long as we romanticize their pain, as long as we make legends out of their deaths, the pattern will continue. Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Jim Morrison's grave is covered in graffiti, fan notes, withered flowers, and empty whiskey bottles. Decades after his death, pilgrims from around the world come to pay their respects. Just meters away, the graves of Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, Chopin, giants of the arts. But Jim's grave has the crowds. Young people in their 20s, many of them tattooed, dressed in black, playing acoustic guitars. The 27 Club has become a modern myth. And like all myths, it reveals truths about ourselves. Amy Winehouse's Back to Black remains one of the best-selling albums of the 21st century. Her voice, that impossible, timeless, heartbreaking voice, can be heard in cafes, films, and commercials. New generations discover her and fall in love with her. Nirvana's Nevermind defined the sound of the 90s and remains relevant. Teenagers in 2025 still put on Smells Like Teen Spirit when they need to channel anger and confusion. Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced revolutionized the electric guitar. Every guitarist since owes a debt to his innovations. Janis Joplin's Pearl captured a voice like no other. White blues sung with an authenticity that few have matched. Art survives. It's the only thing that survives. Documentaries, biographies, films. The lives of these artists are recounted and retold. Some portraits are hagiographies that ignore the complexities. Others are sensationalist exposés that exploit the pain. The best are balances, acknowledging genius while honestly documenting self-destruction. Amy, Asif Kapadia's documentary about Winehouse, won an Oscar in 2016. It shows both brilliance and collapse without cruel judgment. Soaked in Bleach and other documentaries about Kurt Cobain keep conspiracy theories alive, for better or for worse. Each generation reinterprets these lives through its own cultural lens. But here's the hard truth. Despite decades of celebrity deaths from addiction, the industry hasn't fundamentally changed. The business model remains the same. Find young talent, exploit them intensely, discard them when they're no longer profitable. Tours remain brutally exhausting. Contracts still disproportionately favor corporations over artists. The pressure to produce constant hits remains immense. And the drugs are still available. More than ever, in fact. Fentanyl has made overdoses more deadly. Counterfeit pills kill without warning. Lil Peep, Mac Miller, Juice WRLD. The next generation is falling into the same traps. The myth of the 27 Club says, there is something cursed about that specific age. The reality is, extreme fame plus youth plus addiction plus trauma plus lack of effective intervention results in premature death, regardless of the exact age. But humans need narratives. We need patterns. The 27 Club provides structure where there is only chaos. And perhaps that's okay. If the narrative prompts a 26-year-old artist to seek help because they're afraid of joining the club, then the myth saves lives. If it leads managers and family members to intervene more aggressively, then it's worth it. Myths don't need to be literally true to be useful. Keith Richards, now in his 80s, says in interviews, I survived by pure luck. None of my choices were smart. He looks at pictures of Jimi Hendrix and sees a brother who didn't make it to the other side. Eric Clapton, sober for decades after nearly dying multiple times, says, every day after 27 has been borrowed time. His later music may lack the fire of his youth, but he is alive to create it. Survivors carry survivors' guilt. Why me and not them? There are no satisfactory answers. How will we remember the 27 Club in 50 years? In 100? Their songs will continue to resonate as long as there are humans to listen. But the context will change. New generations will discover them without understanding the weight of the era, without grasping the cultural clash they represented. They will be like Mozart or Beethoven, geniuses whose personal lives are simplified into anecdotes, whose art transcends their biography. Perhaps that's okay. Perhaps art should transcend the artist. Or perhaps we lose something crucial when we forget that these were real human beings, with real families, with real pain, who paid the ultimate price for the moments of beauty they gave us. If you could change the past, would you? Would you save Amy, knowing that Back to Black might never exist? Would you save Kurt, risking that Nirvana would never reach those heights? That's a morally obscene question. You would obviously save lives. Art is never worth more than human existence. But we live in the world where they died. And their art comforts us, inspires us, makes us feel less alone. Millions have been touched by their music in ways that save their own lives. Is it possible that their suffering and premature death have, perversely, created more meaning than their long lives would have? Is that thought comforting or repulsive? There is no right answer. Only paradox. The graves of the members of the 27 Club are scattered globally. Jim in Paris, Kurt in a Seattle park where his ashes were scattered, Amy in London, Jimmy in Renton, Washington, Janis in the Pacific, her ashes scattered at sea. But they live on together in collective memory, in playlists, in late-night conversations about genius and tragedy, in warnings from parents to their musician children, in academic studies, in documentaries. In this text, the 27 Club isn't just about death. It's about the impossible tension between creating and self-destructing, between shining brightly and burning out. It's about the cost of art. It's about human fragility amidst superhuman talent. It's a reminder that idols are human, that fame doesn't protect against pain, that genius and suffering often go hand in hand. And more importantly, it's called upon to do better. As an industry, as a society, as fans, as humans who value art, but who must value even more the lives that create it. Because the club is open. It has always been open. And until we change the systems that feed it, it will continue to demand members. The question isn't whether there will be more names. The question is, how many more before we finally learn them? The 27 Club is a mirror. It reflects our cultural values, our appetite for tragic genius, our complicity in systems that consume the vulnerable. It's not a curse. It's a consequence. And as long as we continue to romanticize self-destruction, as long as we celebrate art born from pain without questioning the cost, as long as we turn human tragedies into legends, the pattern will persist. Not at 27 specifically, but in their early 20s, in their 30s. Every time young talent finds fame without a safety net, remember their names. Listen to their music. But also, learn the lessons. Protect the vulnerable. Value life over legend. That is the true legacy of the 27 Club.